Hello, Doug. We got Bob there. Hi, Bob. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you very much. How's everyone?
Good. Just great. Thanks. Thanks for joining us.
I'm gonna make a cup of tea.
Hello, Merlin. How are you?
I'm fine. Can you hear me now?
Sure can. Great to see you today. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. I just ran over my phone with my tractor, but it survived. So, we're all good. But, welcome to spring.
Yes. Doug, are you up on the mountain or are you down in West Kelowna today?
I'm looking out the window at the big white.
Nice. Is it beautiful up there?
It's beautiful, sunny, and huge lineups.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
everybody in the country and the world can come here now. My wife,
Yes, right.
My wife is out more than me, and she even rode the chair with some Russians.
Get out. Oh my God. That's dangerous company to keep these days.
Yeah.
So we've got, as everybody can see, we've got on here the room, the OK Falls Recreation there, rec down here, the room there. That's so we've got kind of a viewing party in addition to all the folks that we see online here.
Okay, folks, we'll get going in a minute or two, just for the last couple of people. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you can. there are a couple of chairs in the middle there. It's a 2-hour meeting, so you may want to grab them. Just saying. Okay, Alan, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, well, folks, we'll get going here in about 1 minute. We'll wait for, see if any more stragglers come in here.
Matt, I just heard from Paul Beminov. He's just downloading the app to come online with us. So maybe we can just give him a minute or two.
And Sherry, I shot you a text a minute ago.
All good.
Okay, well, I think we may as well get going here, folks. First off, can the people in the room hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, and online, you can hear me? Yeah, somebody nod. Yeah.
Matt, yeah, Matt, can you hear me? Can you hear me, Matt?
No, I can't. When you take yourself off mute.
Yeah. Okay. I wonder, can we just wait 1 more minute? Paul, I've been texting with Paul Beminov, and he's just figuring out. He's downloaded the app. It's just going to take a few more seconds here. Oh, yeah. Hi, Paul.
Hi there.
Okay, we good now, Alan?
We're good now. Yes.
All right, folks, we'll get the show on the road. I'm going to address the audience in this room, and I think the people on the screen can hear me and see me. So first off, welcome to the Service and Boundary Configuration Studies panel on incorporation. Essentially, we're here to hear lessons of experience. My name is Matt Taylor. I'm the chair of the Services and Boundary Configuration Study Committee, and that's an RDOS committee. We're funded with funding largely from the provincial government, also RDOS. A few quick comments, and then I will turn the session over to our facilitators, who are the consultants for the project. First, an acknowledgement at the outset, and while I don't know where these people are, but I know I'm sitting here in Okanagan Falls, so we acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional territory of the Silks people of the Okanagan Nation. Purpose of this panel that we're going to hear today is to further inform the public in Okanagan Falls and Area D. At this point in a larger ongoing incorporation process that we've started. As we, And that's residents and committee members prepared to determine where best to place a boundary for a potential incorporated municipality somewhere in Area D. Okay. So Area D includes a number of distinct communities, most of which are primarily residential in nature, with the notable exception of Okanagan Falls town site itself, which has a mix of uses and property classes. There's a strong agricultural community and plenty of wineries. There's also some significant logging or wood-related industries and engineering facilities in the town site, and there's going to be a significant vertical agriculture cropping facility in the very near future, probably this calendar year. We're currently in the process of engaging residents and learning about any issues they have regarding services or governance in each of the individual community or focus areas. We're presently governed by RDOS. The question is whether we would want to consider having a local municipality instead. But residents also want to understand how incorporation might impact their own communities in order to be able to provide better feedback on their interest in whether or not their community could or should be part of an incorporation study. Because we're engaging across the entire electoral area, and that's a necessary part of our mandate from the province. You know, their mandate was to consult the whole area. We anticipate that there will be some communities that are eager to learn more about incorporation, and there are others who will feel that incorporation doesn't make sense for them. We want to emphasize that there are going to be different opinions on this, whether people feel that their particular community should be considered within that boundary for consideration as a possible municipal incorporation, or they feel it should remain outside the boundary, but still within Area D of RDOS. We just want to ensure that prior to arriving at that decision, wherever you wind up landing as to where that boundary might be, the residents are able to inform themselves as best as possible with the substantial and factual information coming from this study. And in time, subsequent study. So that said, I'm going to turn the meeting over now to our consultants so that they can address housekeeping issues for the meeting, lead the panel, and take questions from participants. So it's important that you understand the chair of the meeting is going to be the fellow in the top right there, Alan Nielsen and or Sherry Hurst. If you have a question, raise your hand if you're in the room here. We're also going to ask you to stand up and move to the edge and just come forward a little bit so that the mic can pick you up. And when you're saying your question, take your mask off so that it's easier to hear. Okay? All right. Over to you, Alan, or Sherry.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you for those excellent opening comments. I'm going to just share my screen to help set the stage a little bit further, and then we're going to get right to our panelists because those are the folks, of course, that we have come to hear. So let me, give me a second here. Here we are. I hope everybody can see that. Well, welcome everybody. Just to echo Matt's points, welcome to the discussion panel for this Electoral Area D Service and Boundary Configuration Study. We've got a lot of people kind of online already. We've got folks on screen as a panelist, and we've got a number of people in the room there in Okanagan Falls. So it's wonderful to see this turnout, especially on such a beautiful day. We have four excellent people here who are going to help us learn a little bit about their experiences and what Area D in RDOS may expect going forward from this point. We're going to get some proper introductions to these folks in a moment, but I've got their names on screen. We've got Mayor Merlin Blackwell from the District of Clearwater, Director Paul Beminov from the CSRD Electoral Area C, which is the South Shuswap, Councillor Doug Finlater from not the District of Clearwater, I beg your pardon, that's the City of West Kelowna, and the Chief Administrative Officer, Bob Payette from the District of Barriere. Picking up just on a couple of points that Matt had made, I'll just add a little bit of emphasis here, although he covered it very nicely. The study that is being undertaken right now, it's a service and boundary configuration study, so it has a number of purposes. One is to document and assess the current state of governance and the service delivery in this electoral area. Understand the concerns and the interests of residents related to both governance and service delivery. Recommend, as Matt noted, the most suitable municipal boundary option to consider through an incorporation study, and then recommend finally whether to proceed with an incorporation study. Our panel, as Matt noted, is an opportunity really to learn directly from leaders in other places about the factors that drove their decisions to study incorporation and to ultimately choose incorporation, at least in 3 of the 4 areas to this time right now, because Area C, Paul Beminok's area in South Shuswap CSRD, is just on the verge of kind of going to referendum for incorporation. So they haven't yet chose that, so we'll check in on that a little bit later. In essence, though, we want to get the advice for Area D. What does our discussion panel have by way of advice for the folks in RDOS Electoral Area D? The game plan for the day, we're going to get a good introduction, a proper introduction to the panelists. We've got some members of our committee lined up to give that introduction. We've got panelists' opening comments then. I'll ask each of the 4 panelists to give a couple of opening comments to help, set the stage a little bit for our discussion. We'll then jump into the moderated questions and answers. And as Matt noted, I will kind of go between different folks, and let me get to that in a second, concluding remarks, just in terms of the moderated Q&A. So we're going to ask residents and committee members to pose questions for either individual panelists or for the panel as a whole, and then I as moderator can help to direct those as we go along. You've got a questions function in your web site there, and or simply just raise hand, and then we'll work with Danny Francisco, who was our resident IT specialist, who's with us today. We'll work with Danny to make sure that everybody who has put forward a question has an opportunity to have that asked properly and to have it responded to. Okay, let me cancel that. We're going to go back to our main attraction here. There we go. I'm now going to ask individual members of the committee who have been pre-assigned to introduce our panelists. Kay Medlin is going to start off by introducing Bob Payette, and then Bob Daly, our vice chair of the committee, is going to introduce Doug Finlater. Eleanor Walker is going to introduce Paul Beminov, and finally, Phyllis is going to introduce Merlin. Phyllis Retchenko is going to introduce Merlin. So we will start, and that is Mayor Blackwell. We're going to start then, if we could, with Kay Medlin introducing Bob Payette. Kay, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to introduce Bob Payette, the Chief Administrative Officer, or CAO, for the District of Barrier, which was incorporated in 2008. Bob brings with him 12 years of experience as a CAO in both British Columbia and Alberta, and has been involved in developing policies, procedures, and local bylaws. He has also been involved in the design, building, and startup of over $60 million in municipal infrastructures. Some background on Bob. Prior to returning to university to obtain his Master's of Public Administration, Bob served 12 years in the military. He has been married for 34 years, has 1 daughter, and thinks he may be ready to take up golf full time.
You're muted.
I beg your pardon. Thank you very much, Kay. And Bob, it's a great day for golf out there today, so we're grateful that you've chosen to be here with us instead. I'm going to come back to you in a minute, Bob, just to get a few opening comments from you. But before I do, maybe we can turn to Bob Daly, our vice chair of the committee, who's going to introduce Doug Finlater. Are you there, Bob? No, we're having trouble connecting with Bob Bailey there.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, now I got you. We got you now. Thank you, Bob.
Well, that was easy enough. I'll go back to the start. Please in the leader of our panel discussion today. Doug's 47-year resident, what used to be the unincorporated area of West Bank and is now the city of West Kelowna. Doug's well known throughout the Okanagan. He retired from a successful 34-year career with the federal government with Department of Canadian Heritage, formerly Secretary of State Department, serving BC Interior, the North, and Yukon. Doug's best known for his community and his public service over the last number of decades. Doug was in West Bank during 2 unsuccessful incorporation referenda, including during his membership on the West Bank Incorporation Study Committee from 1992 to 94. From 2003 to 2007, Doug chaired the West Side Governance Committee, and the result was a referendum with public approval for incorporation. Doug was the top polling councillor for 2007 New Municipalities First Council. The following year, he was elected mayor. Doug held the mayor position until 2018, when he decided to step down and run for councillor, a position he presently serves. We're happy to have Doug with us today to share his experiences and knowledge regarding incorporation studies and incorporation. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you very much, Bob. Eleanor, could we ask you to introduce Director Paul Beminov, please? Matt, have we got Eleanor there, Matt?
Hi, Alan. This is Danny. Eleanor's not online. I don't know if she's in the room, but she's not online, so we might need to.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay. You know what? Let me jump in. I've known Paul many years. I can kind of give an impromptu introduction to Paul, if that's all right with you, Paul. It won't be as eloquent as Eleanor, I'm sure, or as polished, but here we go. So Paul Beminov is the Electoral Area Director for Electoral Area C. He has been in that position now, I'm going to say 3 terms. Have I got that right, Paul? 3 terms. Wonderful. Okay. So Sherry and I, in fact, first met Paul back in 2016 when we started the type of study that Area D and RDOS is now doing, and that is the Governance and Services Study. And we worked closely with Paul and the Governance Committee at that time, and certainly we're impressed by Paul's intimate knowledge of Area C and everything that it does. Paul then went on as Electoral Area D Electoral Area C Director to serve also in an ex officio and non-voting capacity in the 2 subsequent studies, and that is, one was in the boundary analysis study that was done to come up with a boundary for Sorrento Blind Bay Incorporation area, and then most recently, which just came to a close literally a couple of nights ago, was the Sorrento Blind Bay Incorporation Study Advisory Committee. So Paul has helped to shepherd the process right from the very beginning, right to the point it's at now, which is about to go with a recommendation for a referendum to CSRD board on March 17th. Paul, I know, loves to travel. I know that he has worked for many years in Paul, I'm going to say in sales of medical and other equipment. I'm going by memory here based on our discussions in the past, but has been active as a consultant in his past as well. And thank you, Paul, for taking the time to be here with us today. You will bring a particularly important perspective, I think, because you're in an area that is still unincorporated, but has been moving towards and looking carefully at incorporation and is a little bit ahead in the process compared to where RDOS is, Area D is right now. So thank you for being here with us today. I will now be asking Phyllis if she can introduce Mayor Blackwell from Clearwater.
Good afternoon. Can everyone hear me? Okay, excellent.
Sure can.
It's my pleasure to introduce our Mayor Merlin Blackwell. He's worked in BC Parks as a staffer starting from age of 12 years. He finished his career at 49 as the operator of BC Parks Wells Grade region. He's done 5 years in radio and 3 or more in other media. And he's been a restaurant manager and a whole bunch of other things, including cat burger. He became a full-time resident of Clearwater in 2003, and he had worked summers there since 1989 while living nearby in Wells Grade. He's the chamber vice president and did 2 terms on council before being elected mayor during the last election. I did ask him a couple of questions because I'm always interested about what motivates people to do public service. And I asked him, what motivates you to be engaged in public office? And what are 2 things of that you're very proud of? And he said he really enjoys problem solving. He loves advocating for people that he represents. He does no holding back. As representatives, we're not elected to be shy or quiet. Greatest achievements, he said, leading through the mill closure, a couple of hairy fire seasons, and of course, COVID. And he believes the most important legacy of being a mayor or any other elected official is that you're remembered not for being someone but you are remembered for being someone who led with honor and did a good job. It's not about the bridges, buildings, big shiny events. That's not his thing. His thing is making sure that he's got some integrity. The other question I had was, how do you engage residents to contribute to the Clearwater community? And he said he's a very available mayor. And I have to say, I contacted him and he got back to me almost immediately. So I was really impressed by that. He says, I do regular office hours. I'm on social media quite a lot, make myself available to anyone who wants to chat at local events, the coffee shop, the grocery store. We have a community newsletter. Basically do any other media and anyone requests. I talk about my personal struggles with health, hobbies, etc., and make myself relatable to people. And I'm sure we're going to get a very good presentation today from all of the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Phyllis. Excellent introduction. Thank you again to all 4 panelists. I'm going to ask Matt, before we move on, just to introduce our own electoral area director, Ron Aubry, if you could do that for us, Matt.
On the right here, we have Ron Obrecht, Area D director. Ron's in his first term as director in that role. Comes to us from Edmonton, where he's spent some 34 years as a practicing lawyer, still practicing, and living in the quote-unquote sub-community of Area D, Heritage Hills.
Yes, thank you very much, Matt, and to everyone. The panelists, we are so looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I think the key takeaway was this is our opportunity to learn from others. So thank you very much.
Okay, Alan, lead on.
Thank you very much, Ron, and thank you, Matt, for that. Okay, folks. First of all, just a little technical note to Danny, our IT specialist. If we could just keep it on this current grid pattern, that'd be great. Then we can, because some of the questions are going to go to all of the panelists. Now, moving on, let me ask if I could, I'd like to invite each of the panelists just to give some brief opening comments to help us set the stage, and then we'll jump right into the questions. And we'll start with a question after that from a committee member. But first, if we could just ask our panelists to give a couple of opening points. And maybe I'll start, if I could, with Paul Beminov from Area C in Columbia-Shuswap.
Thanks, Alan. Well, thanks. Can you hear me all right?
You bet.
Good. Thanks for the invitation. I appreciate the opportunity to share some information with your group. And we had a similar opportunity in our area where we met with 5 mayors and a councillor, if you would, from other jurisdictions. And it was very helpful to our community to hear from them firsthand. So I look forward to the questions that we may get today. Alan, you had described our situation perfectly. We've been through the governance study. We've been through the boundary analysis. We just completed the incorporation study. So let's see now. We started that whole process in 2015. So it's about 7 years now that we've been going through this analysis. And if nothing else, you'll get to learn an awful lot about how local government works. And that's worth something as well. So thank you, Alan. It's been a pleasure to work with you and Sherry throughout that period.
Thank you very much, Paul, and likewise, I know I can speak for Sherry as well in saying that. Thank you, Paul. Doug Finlater, give us some opening words of wisdom.
I think I'm unmuted.
You're
yes,
good now. Yeah.
couple of interesting bits of trivia. First, Barrier and Clearwater, who are on here, are the siblings of the city of West Kelowna, in the sense that District of Westside, Barrier and Clearwater were all incorporated formally on the same day in 2007. I think we all had visits from Minister Ida Chong zipping around the interior that day to be with us. I do know Okanagan Falls a little bit. I go through there more than stop. I have a cousin who lives there. Some of you may know him by name. So I'm not unfamiliar with your community. I've lived in my community since 1975. We've had 1, 2, 3. This is four studies, and the last one was successful. I think we were about 5,000 people when we started out, and over that time we grew rapidly. At the time of incorporation, we were 27,000. We're now 37,000. And I'll simply say our study was very complex. It took 4 years, and that was straight through. We had trouble finding a consultant for phase 2, and we wound up happily with Alan and Peter. I'll say more about our phase 1 when you get to one of the questions, but it's very complex. And we had multiple options as opposed to incorporate or not. And it did involve a lot of cleavage in the community that we had to overcome, both before the referendum and afterwards. And we can talk about that.
Thank you very much, Doug. Excellent primer there to get us thinking about some questions as well. Let's go to Bob, if I could, in Barrier. Thanks, Bob. Oh, we just got you on mute there still. Oh, there we go. You're good now. You're good now.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Alan. And yeah, thanks for having me. Mayor Ward Stamer sends out his regards. He's away today, but he would love to join us. Myself and the mayor, when it comes to public consultation, we do try and do our presentations together as much as possible, so that our residents in the region, they see both of us at the same time. I mean, obviously the mayor is the voice of the community, but the administrator definitely supports the mayor 100% when it comes to public consultation. Just as kind of a little bit of an interest, this is the mayor's office, but right behind him, just following up from my colleague earlier, this is what you get when you incorporate. You get this nice little certificate, and it's signed by the minister, Ida Kwong, just like you said. And I'll just read the final paragraph. It basically says that the date of transfer of jurisdiction for the following services from the TNRD, which is our regional district, to the District of Barrier, 2007. And then it lists the services that the municipality has agreed to take on. And it's quite a large list. So that's always there. So we did incorporate in 2007. We're just slightly south of Clearwater, and also just slightly a nicer community, actually. 2-year study. The result of the vote for incorporation was 51-49. And there's a lot of discussion involved with that close of a vote, that if residents from your region have, we can talk about that. We've had 3 CAOs since incorporation. And that's fortunate, actually, for a municipality. The first CAO, Wayne, I can't remember his last name, but he brought the municipality in through the changes for the first few years. He was an accountant by trade and very suitable for that initial incorporation period. The second CAO was a certified planner for 8 years, Colleen, and very, again, timely and suitable during a process of a number of years of boundary planning and subdivision approval and the complex areas of land delineation. And then third is myself. I've been here for 2 years, and basically my area of expertise is building capacity. And so in my 35-year career in public service, I have many examples of building human capacity, infrastructure capacity, and best of all, financial capacity and sustainability. And just finally, we only get a minute here, but just kind of maybe to spur a little bit of discussion is we just went through an additional boundary extension in the last 2 years. And so, developing that boundary from the start and nailing it as best as you can, will really help out in the years to follow as you kind of develop as a municipality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Excellent advice. Let's go finally to Mayor Blackwell in that lesser of the two communities, apparently. I don't know.
This again, these guys, they just never, anyways. Hi, from Clearwater, beautiful little town, much more beautiful, just slightly north of Barrier, farther away from Kamloops. We're about 2,400 people in town. We are quite spread out. Looking at OK Falls, I'm quite jealous because you have a very sort of defined downtown area. Clearwater sort of has 3 of those, which we can't generally find all the time. I moved to Clearwater as a full-time resident 2003, as mentioned in the bio. And Clearwater had the rumblings of thinking about being incorporated then. It was actually the rumblings of their 3rd attempt. And when that came around in the process, I advocated for incorporation just as an average citizen, because I couldn't understand why you wouldn't want to have control of your own destiny and your own facilities. They're really, Clearwater had a business community that's based on tourism, logging, a little bit of mining, and a lot of highway traffic. But it really didn't have any cohesiveness as far as planning or anything like that. And that was one of the things that I sort of really noticed was missing from the equation. Since then, since incorporation, we've done quite well. I think we're almost pushing towards $27 million worth of provincial grants, all sorts of projects, new shopping center, trails committees, arts programs, tons of things happening in Clearwater. And it's came up in Paul Demonik's study, that one of the questions there, which I think is worth a discussion, and I hope it comes up here as well, is a real sense of community, a really focused sense of who we are, celebration of town, and a lot of community pride. And I'll leave it for there, and we'll go on to the rest of it.
Thank you very much, Mayor. That's excellent stuff. Okay, let's jump into the questions and answers now. So I'm going to, you've got the ability to ask questions online through your Q&A. You've also got the ability to raise your hand, both literally if you're in that room of that Matt's in there, the kind of the viewing room there, or figuratively if you are online. So Matt, is there a question there from the room, either yourself or an individual in the room, that you'd like to start us off with?
Well, I hate to put the pressure on you, but not at the moment.
Okay, that's all right. Let me jump off. Let me kind of also, I will set the stage then with a question for panelists. And the question really is, at what point in your respective communities, at what point did it make sense for you to consider incorporation, to kind of look from your unincorporated status to move to incorporation, or to at least move down that road? Was it a particular issue? Was it a set of issues? Was it a particular concern that you had? Let me get everybody to chime in on that if we could, and maybe we'll go in reverse order. And again, Mayor Blackwell, give us your thoughts on that. Was there what prompted Clearwater to move down the road towards incorporation?
I think one of the biggest factors was we were starting to shrink in towards all services heading back towards Kamloops and the big centers. The Canfor mill, or sorry, no, the Weyerhaeuser mill at the time had closed a couple years before. We had no real direction on tourism. We had a lot of aging infrastructure. A lot of the government offices here, whether it be forestry or welfare or other things like that, they were all getting sucked back into places like Kamloops and away from, you know, the bush where they belong, especially when it comes to forestry jobs and things like that. So some of it started as a fight to try to retain some of those things and just having a EA director rep versus a council that could go directly to Victoria. That was one of the factors on that. And the other thing is we had a lot of infrastructure here that was sort of hodgepodge together from various improvement districts, regional districts, things that existed before regional districts, and we really didn't know what we were dealing with on a lot of those things. But we did know is they all needed a lot of work. But there was also the sense that we were a town, that we already were a town and we were a community, and we kind of wanted to have the ability to say, well, this is where your local taxes go to. This is, we want to have things like music in the park. At that point, we weren't even celebrating Canada Day as a community because there was no sort of central focused group of citizens trying to make things happen. So, there are community clubs and things like that, like Rotary and that sort of thing, but we just didn't have that feel, and a lot of people wanted that.
Super. Thank you very much. Excellent comments. Director Beminov, give us a sense of Area C in Sorrento Blind Bay in particular. What kind of prompted the community to start to move, at least start looking at into an incorporation study, and then we'll see perhaps even incorporation post April 30th?
Yeah, Alan, I don't think there was any one issue in our area that sort of prompted it. The discussion, as you know, has been going on in our area for about 20 years. And there had been a previous study done way back in the 90s that kind of looked at the question for Sorrento only and kind of concluded that Sorrento wasn't really large enough. And in the meantime, we'd seen development sort of merge Sorrento and Blind Bay so that they're almost one contiguous community now, especially along the waterfront. So there wasn't any one issue. As our population, though, our latest census shows our population at 8,900 people. So that's a lot of representation being directed into one EA director. And we had other electoral areas in our regional district with 1,200, 1,400 people who basically had the same unweighted vote at the table as we did. So there were those kinds of questions that started popping up in the community, and part of the impetus was to obtain better representation. So our question is really going to be phrased in maybe a bit of a unique way. I'm not sure what the exact wording will be, but the choice is going to be between taking Area C of 8,900 people and subdividing it into one municipality and one electoral area, or subdividing it into two electoral areas. And part of the impetus is to improve our representation at the boardroom table, improve our representation of the community, but at least bringing one.
Okay. That's great. Thank you, Paul. We're just having a little trouble. We just had a bit of a weak connection there for a second there, but I think we got the bulk of your comments. So that's excellent. Thank you. Let me go to Councillor Finlater. Doug, as you mentioned, you've been there from the beginning, as it were. In fact, pre-beginning, because you did such an excellent job of chairing the committee that kind of went from phase 1 into phase 2 and then ultimately into a new city. So what prompted? What was it that kind of convinced West Kelowna that it was time to start looking at a new form of governance?
Study of a sort was done in in 1974. I hadn't moved to the community then. I moved there a year later, and it was a very cursory review. There was no interest in incorporating. Still about 4,000 people, very rural, proud to not be under the thumb of government. It was a very different community back in those days, but it was kind of the charm that led us to move and grow our family there. 83, there was a formal study done, fairly detailed, funded by the ministry. It was defeated 89% for incorporation, very overwhelming. Another study done in 92, 93, it was defeated 66% to 33, 34. That one was led by the business community, which always wanted a form of city for the kind of reasons that Merlin mentioned. I was staunchly in 92, 93, and before that, I didn't want to incorporate. I was happy with the status quo. We don't need to do this. Life was good. And so I was part of the 92, 94 committee. And because of that, and I got on the committee for 2004, and they were trying to be representative. They made me the chair, and I was the status quo person, ironically, to being on that chair. But I changed my mind partway through the study, and I think I probably reflected the community. By then, we were growing rapidly. We were 25,000. We were growing up the hillsides. I learned a lot about how deficient regional districts are in managing taxpayers' money and bringing urban services to people that want them, especially in a growing area like ours. So I flipped in about 2005. I said we need the powers that a municipality has to get a handle on growth, deliver the services, build reserves, apply for grants, because regional districts couldn't do that stuff at that time. And so I said we have to go under the Local Government Act. Our committee and our community was still divided. About half our community, which say Lakeview Heights and Casa Loma, Rose Valley, for those of you that know the area, did not see much point in incorporating and joining West Bank. And West Bank saw a lot of value in incorporating on their own. The North End wanted to join Kelowna. The people in Lakeview Heights had a great affinity for Kelowna. It was just across the bridge, especially even Casa Loma. That's where people work, and didn't feel they had much in common with West Bank. So this is where the complexity comes in for the study. And Alan, you were part of this, although this complexity was dealt with in phase one, which we had a guy named Bob Stile from Stantec doing for us as a consultant. And ultimately it led to three options. In the referendum, there was one question. Do you want to put the area, whatever we were, under the Local Government Act, powers of the municipality? And if you could either say yes or no, that passed 84%. People saw value in better management that comes with municipal government. The second question was the cliffhanger. Do you want to incorporate West Bank, or do you want to join Kelowna? And it was also a referendum on amalgamation. We had added Kelowna, three representatives from Kelowna to our committee in the last year of the study. So the outcome of that referendum was about 51% wanted to incorporate, and 49% wanted to join Kelowna. And that led to a lot of bickering and unhappiness for the first few years that we had to deal with. And I was on the first council. But I think over time, and this is an important point, people realized it did make sense to incorporate all of the west side from the bridge to Peachland, leaving out the northwest side, which was more of the electoral area that we didn't want and they didn't want us. So it was a cliffhanger at the time. But I must say now, I'm 14 years as a councillor, 10 as mayor, and you make controversial decisions that half the people don't like all the time. At least they understand what a city is. and they know they can reach out and try to strangle you, but they have no idea what a regional district is because they all come from somewhere else, and what a regional director is. They haven't got a clue. So I find there's a lot of satisfaction from people, even in the, say, let's Casa Loma. That's where some of my strongest support has been, because I listen to them, and that they're actually kind of glad that we incorporated as an area. I've got more to say,
That's excellent.
but that's it for now.
Perfect. Thank you, Doug. So that accountability really strong, and maybe a case too of if you're a person kind of, you know, with your head in the noose, be careful what you wish for, but nevertheless,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you. That's excellent. Bob, I'm gonna ask you a different question if I could, Bob, because one of the issues that has been big for Area D, Okanagan Falls and Area D, one of the issues that has kind of come up again and again, and I know it's come up in your respective communities, panelists, has been that of roads. And let's just say that what Sherry and I have heard, and I know the committee has heard in our various public meetings, has been that roads aren't as good as people would like them. So, Bob, can you tell me in Barrier, this is a question from one of our committee members posted online, what, in a general sense, what, or in an estimated sense, what portion of your budget would be spent on road maintenance, sewer, and snow removal? And how has kind of roads been for Barrier in terms of impact on budget, in terms of kind of a difficult thing to manage, a good thing to have control over? What's your thoughts on roads?
Oh, okay, thanks. I was studying on the last question, so.
Sorry.
Well,
just threw you a bit of a curve there.
Yeah, this is a good question. So specifically with roads, let me just preface my comments by saying, you know, in your studying and in your reviews, and working with the regional district and the ministry, take care in understanding the boundaries and the long-term costs of the roads, for sure. And for example, we have one of our arterial roads connects directly to Highway 5, and it basically services the regional district. But for some reason, during incorporation, it was included in our boundaries. And so the municipality has the full 100% responsibility for what I consider a provincial road. And the road is at least 2 kilometers long. And, you know, everybody knows the cost of repairing or replacing a road is about $1 million per kilometer. So be very careful with the province, and don't be quick to jump at taking on roads if you don't have to. And analyze it. Get an engineering company to analyze the roads and the lifespan of each road. It takes a little bit of money up front, but go into this wide open. Your eyes have to be wide open. The municipality does not spend enough tax dollars on roads. I can tell you that right now. It's impossible. So what we've been doing is we've been putting money in reserve as best as we can. We currently have about $1 million in road reserve. So you can do the math quickly. That'll fix 1 kilometer of road. We have just under 30 kilometers of road. And so that's deteriorating. Each year, we do our best to maintain roads. We keep them up to a minimum municipal standard. We contract out snow removal, and we contract out major work on the roads. Personally, I think for a smaller municipality, that's more cost effective to contract out. But there is a economy of scale when you get to be a bigger municipality to look at taking roads internally. Thank you.
That's excellent. That's excellent advice. Thank you very much, Bob. And Doug, we've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Just a quick aside, West Kelowna is still doing most road maintenance with contractors all these years later, although we're starting to talk about some meaningful crews for snow plowing and for road repair. But one I want to mention for those that are considering incorporation, one thing we did, and we were sure glad we did it, was we found some money along the way for a road study before we incorporated. We had it as all of the roads assessed for deflection and all of the engineering kind of things that they do by EBA Consulting. And we had a pretty good baseline when we went into negotiations with the province. We didn't look at bridges, which have hurt us. We've got a number of small bridges, and I'd recommend that you do bridges as well. And the thing that has hammered us that we missed at the time of incorporation and before was drainage. Ministry of Highways does the worst possible job of drainage, of clearing ditches, culverts, making sure there's not slope failure, culverts are cleared, all of that kind of thing. And we have spent millions and millions of dollars dealing with deficient drainage because we didn't catch it and the ministry didn't look after it. So that would be something for someone going into incorporation, get the money to do that study, and ask the ministry to fix it up before they give it to you.
Thank you very much, Doug. Now I've got Matt, you've got your hand up, and then I want to throw something to Director Beminov and to Mayor Blackwell, but we've got a few questions lining up online here. So Matt, go ahead.
Okay, just if Bob would just clarify, is that 1 million per year per kilometer?
No, $1 million a kilometer to repairs.
Yeah, repairs going in.
Redo the road costs $1 million a kilometer.
Okay. I have a question from the gent here who was just dealing with that, and I have a question from our director, and I have a question from Judy Gardner.
Okay, wonderful. I'm going to come to Judy's here, and before I do, let me just ask Director Beminov. You had Paul. I know that it's similar to West Kelowna that area, the Sorrento Blind Bay had looked at the roads done by an engineering firm. What is your what have you? How much of it have roads been an issue for Sorrento Blind Bay, and what are your thoughts around that?
Well, there's no doubt that roads is by far the biggest single topic I receive complaints about, whether it's winter snow removal, fixing potholes, sight lines, safety, et cetera. So we have a lot of ongoing complaints about it. Interestingly enough, when we did the study with urban systems, we identified all the roads in our area that were rated as very poor or poor according to MOTI standards and according to urban systems. And since that point in time, MOTI has gone ahead and paved all those roads. So it's kind of interesting that they just took action early and fixed all those roads that were in that category. So it's kind of interesting that that occurred. Going forward, I would suggest that if we have a successful referendum towards incorporation, that we would certainly think about doing things like a drainage study and other studies to further determine the quality of our roads.
Thank you very much. Mayor Blackwell, just to close off the comments on roads, I know that the Clearwater's got some good thoughts on this one, and then we'll go on and talk a little bit about setting the boundary in different residential areas. Go ahead.
Yeah, and part of that will be that comment. For sure, everything that everybody else said, for sure. Clearwater has 72 kilometers of road. We have about $40 million worth of road, quote unquote, asset within the boundary. We have our own contractor, which we have graciously also shared with Barrier now, so they can have good services. The nice thing about having your own winter road maintenance contractor versus being in an RD is it's yours. You want snow plowing done first, it gets done first before the highway. Things like that. Repairs are fairly, easy to get done within a day or two. But yes, absolutely study bridges, study drainage, study your roads. Clearwater, I don't know what the deal is with this one, but we didn't actually have to maintain our roads for the first 5 years. The province continued to do that. I don't know if that will be the deal if you decide to incorporate. But we did the same thing, got that study from somebody in the Okanagan who was very good at it, and basically convinced MOTI that they needed to do $3 or $4 million worth of free road repairs before they handed them over to us at the 5-year mark of incorporation. So yes, look.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Let's move on and talk a little bit about, we've got a few questions lined up here, so we'll move quickly through some of these. One question from Judy Gardner, who is an individual who has taken a keen interest in the study and been at all the meetings. The question asks panelists to talk about your different residential areas. When we look at Area D and RDOS, we've got a number of different communities, and we've over the last couple of weeks, the committee has actually reached out and had individual open houses with those different communities. And we've done that in order to understand kind of the level of support or lack thereof in the different communities, and also to get a sense of the types of questions and issues that each community has. But from a residential perspective, in your respective communities, how many different kind of sub-communities are there? And were there issues kind of having different sub-communities? And maybe this relates to how to draw the boundary. Maybe this relates a little bit to the divisiveness issue that you talked about in some of your answers already. Mayor Blackwell, let's go right back to you. We'll mix up the order a little bit to get you talking again.
Yeah, for sure. Clearwater is very spread out. If I was doing this again, if I was in charge of the incorporation study, I definitely would have shaved a couple neighborhoods or areas off of what the actual boundaries of the District of Clearwater are. You know, you really need to try to focus on the areas with either good industry, good commercial ventures, or relatively dense neighborhoods. Semi-rural is okay, but once you start getting over those lots that are 15, 20 acres or more, providing services out to some of those areas like fire protection or water lines, if they hadn't already predated the incorporation. One of our areas is called Miller Subdivision. It's quite a ways out of downtown. It's probably got 7 or 8K of its own dedicated water line going out there. I would never have taken that one on as part of the incorporation study. So be very clear as to where you draw your boundaries of the area that you want to incorporate, and also think of, which areas maybe the residents are not going to be so thrilled with the concept of it. But generally, we've got a little bit of farming. We've got very dense, very Kamloops or Kelowna looking neighborhoods, and then a lot of what we call country residential, which is 2 to 5 acre lots, one house, logging trucks in the backyard, hobby farms, things like that. That's the core main area of Clearwater. Plus, we even have things like woodlots inside the footprint of our boundaries. So it's quite diverse, but I would have tightened it up a little bit over what we ended up with.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Doug, how about you with Nest Kelowna? I know you mentioned phase 1 of your study looked at boundary. You talked about northwest side being outside and kind of that done purposely. What advice can you give in terms of different residential areas and how to get that boundary?
Well, at the end of the day, in our phase 1, we picked what was the regional district west side OCP with a few changes. And then that's what we went to referendum on. And then courtesy of Rick Thorpe, our MLA at the time of incorporation, some of the boundaries were changed again to exclude the Crystal Mountain Ski Resort. So beware the province. We weren't happy about that. But we have within our boundaries as well 2 very sophisticated self-governing Indian Reserve, First Nations Reserve in West Bank First Nation. We have, if we have a downtown, it's on First Nations land where some of the malls are. We are really a disconnected community in many ways. We've got about 10 residential areas, but as I say, after 10 or so years, it all kind of hangs together. We as a council really respect and work hard to respect each neighborhood and neighborhood association and bring them in when we appoint committees. We try to get representation from different areas. And I would say one other bit of advice, and it was talked about at the time, we should have a ward system for north and south or different communities. Am I ever glad we didn't? I think if we had a ward system, we would still be fighting amongst ourselves. And we put the fighting behind us, a good 7 or 8 years ago, where people do, for the most part, feel it's one community. Yeah, there's a few people that still want the name West Bank. There's a few people that still wished we had joined Kelowna, but they're pretty, I don't hear from them very often. And their howls of indignation are not very loud anymore. So you've got to try to get everybody working together, and we've been able to do that. That's what I'd suggest. Stay away from the ward system and pick neighborhoods that hang together. If we take it in the northwest side, which is for those who know their geography in the Okanagan, north of Bear Creek, Ewings, Killenny, Fintry, I think we'd have interminable bickering as well. Certainly those areas bicker with the regional district, which is out of Kelowna, and Alan knows all about that because they've had it for a study. We're glad we don't have them, and they're glad that they're not part of us. So we picked an area that which at the end of the day has been cohesive. We have 2 water treatment plants, one finished years ago and another one under construction that will serve virtually everyone in our community who is connected to water. There's a few people on well water, and that's another issue. But it's a compact enough area that we can put together contracts for road maintenance, snow clearing, and so on, and be fairly efficient.
Thank you so much. And just for folks, because wards are not a common thing in British Columbia, but just so everybody understands what those are, they're really electoral districts within a municipality, and each district would elect a councillor to that district. Yeah, go ahead, Doug.
Lake Country is a modified ward system. They have 3 from historical communities, and then they have some other councillors who are at large and a mayor at large. So that was the compromise they made at the time of incorporation, and they're still recent. I think they're about 95, so they're amongst the youngsters in terms of incorporation. That's what they had to do.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, we're gonna go to another question, and then I'll get Director Beminov and Mr. Payette in on that question. Matt, we've got a gentleman who's lined up first in your room there. Can you help us with that?
I've lost one. I'll go to Alan, and I've got our director. I've got Murray.
Okay.
So one thing I would say, we've lost a few people already. If you can express your question as quickly as if you were writing it, and then we get an opportunity to get it answered and get more questions. Thanks.
I do have a question for the panel. I would first like to briefly describe my suburb, the Scott Estates Improvement District, so that your answers will apply to our situation. Our trustees and occasional volunteers have always done all of the routine work to operate our water system and our lakefront park, whether cleaning out our 2 reservoirs, getting up at 3 a.m. to start a pump when an alarm goes off in a trustee's bedroom, finding leaks, or testing fire hydrants. For the last decade, Scott Estates has put money aside every year against that inevitable time when our aging infrastructure will require major repairs. Our very competently run village of only 400 people has $1 million in the bank. But if we join the proposed town, our improvement district will be dissolved, and there won't be any Scott Estates body of any nature to spend our $1 million on our needs. And I realize $1 million in South West Kelowna with 400 people is quite a bit. And our community-minded trustees who do some things free and otherwise work for a flat $20 per hour will be gone. So they'll have to be replaced by far more expensive employees at union wages. Scott Estates has none of the rampant crime, abandoned vehicles, uncontrolled blasting, or other problems that have been given as reasons why a town is needed. It is very true we cannot apply for provincial grant money. So that's a significant matter. But then Scott Estates has never been given even a 1% share of the gas tax grant money that is available now for Area D communities. I'm almost done. At the Incorporation Committee's February 16th meeting for Skaha Estates residents, only one person from Skaha Estates wanted to become part of the proposed town. Only one person. Half a century ago, our lakefront park was entirely paid for by Skaha Estates residents only. But we are also taxed for the purchase cost and maintenance of lakefront parks at Okanagan Falls, which we obviously do not use, we have our own, and other services for Okanagan Falls that we rarely, if ever, use. Skaha Estates is a community where tax dollars flow in only one direction, out to benefit Okanagan Falls.
Hold on, I'm gonna need the question.
My question to the mayors and councilors is this: did all of the improvement districts or irrigation districts that came together to form your town all join willingly after having a separate poll for their village in the referendum, or were some forced to join? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's start, Bob. Let's start with you. I think in Barrier you had some improvement districts, did you not, prior to starting?
Yeah, thank you very much. And those are great comments from the gentleman there. And all of that is true. Everything you've said is true. The district of Barrier, was an irrigation district, had the same comments that the gentleman had during the process, during the voting process, and the vote was 51-49. So yeah, people were dragged into the district, and people wanted to be in the district. And, even to this day, almost 20 years later, the sentiment still percolates in the community as to the value of incorporating or not. And, I'm an administrator, I'm a fact-based, individual. And I can say this, if it helps anybody out there, one thing that incorporating has done for Barrier is it has made Barrier sustainable, and the services are predictable. The quality of water meets regulations. Yes, we are unionized, but our human capacity is insured, and the services are insured and insurable. And these are important considerations in today's world. Thank you.
Thank you. Merlin, let me come to you, and then Paul, I'm going to ask you your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, part of my job in my previous day job before I got out of it was actually running 5 water systems, so I sympathize with that under BC Parks and Interior Health. So I feel the pain on that one. As far as was anybody brought in kicking and screaming, not to my recollection, it was, there was no particular neighborhoods that did or didn't want to be in there. We are surrounded by little populated areas of the regional district, Blackpool to the south, Vavenby, Birch Island to the north or east, depending. The highway's just sort of weird. Yeah, obviously they're concerned. As for what incorporation does bring to the table, everything that Bob said, absolutely, 100%. And particularly when you're going to talk about water systems, we recently got a $4 million grant a couple of years ago to put in a new drinking, our third well, almost completely from federal and provincial sources that didn't come from local tax base, and that's basically securing our water supply for the next 10 or 15 years with modern everything, completely up to standard. Yes, it's operated by level 3 union operators, but someone who has spent a lot of time looking at things like that, your ability to lobby for those and get those grants and to do those kind of projects as a local government versus a regional district. I also sit on the TNRD board. What we're having to look at for cost per person for supplying water at some of the systems in the TNRD at $10,000 a head per year. We're going to have to find some way to subsidize that out of other TNRD funds. water alone would be one of the scariest things, and one of the most important reasons I can think of for incorporating, because it isn't going to get any cheaper or any simpler.
Thank you very much, Merlin. Paul, and I'll come to you in a second there, Doug, but let me just bring Paul back into the conversation. Paul, I know that in Sorrento Blind Bay and that study area, there aren't any improvement districts. There is, however, a large private utility, Shuswap Lake Estates, and there are a number of different water utilities. I wonder, just from your perspective, if we kind of look at improvement districts, separate water utilities, private utilities, what's your sense as they all relate to study areas and boundaries and incorporation arguments for and against?
Well, Alan, the private utility in our area is quite a large one. I think there's about 1,100 hookups for the water system and about 400 for the sewer system. So I think it's a fairly large, relatively speaking, system, and I think it's well run. I think the regional district has done a great job of running the, 4 or 5 water services that we have in our area. And I would anticipate that, reflecting on the individual's comments, that I think Bob hit the nail on the head, that I think you're going to be more sustainable over the long term by having a public management of your water systems than sort of a half volunteer, half minimum wage kind of payment system. I think you're going to be much better off to have that professionally managed over the long term. And I would reflect on the commentary that we're usually stronger together than we are apart. With respect to different communities, we have 3 different communities in our area: Shuswap Lake Estates, Cedar Heights, Sorrento. And yes, there has been the us versus them thing happen in this area too. And I personally find that rather distasteful. I really don't like to see that. To some extent, there has been some divisiveness along those lines, the us versus them scenario. And I would hope that people would get over that and would think about the benefits of being together as a group rather than balkanized into small little subdivisions that are all quarreling with each other. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much, Paul. I'm going to go to Doug, and then I've got a question from Ron Obrick, our director in Area D. But Doug, I know West Kelowna, of course, you had 2 very large irrigation districts that I seem to recall were not super thrilled to be dissolved at one point, at least.
They fought it, the 2 irrigation districts, and then there were 3 smaller water utilities that had already been taken over by the regional district, which regional districts have been doing for some time because a lot of the real small ones just can't survive. So our 2 West Bank and Lakeview irrigation districts were given 3 years grace after incorporation, and then they came in 2010. I was kind of annoyed at first, but in retrospect, it was good because we had lots to do as a new council of a fairly large community, and without taking them on, they took care of all the employee issues for us, and every employee came in. They all had jobs, and they had a bigger career path in other water systems. And actually, water and sewer aren't that different, and we look after sewers as well. There were 3 employees that left. 1 retired who was intending to retire, and 2 got bought out very, very nicely. If you're worried about career paths, some of the trustees, at least 2, have gone on to become counselors over the years. And Carol Zanin, many of you would know from ORL and other things, is still on council, I think eternally. The biggest thing that's been hanging over us is interior health. And our water systems for many years have failed interior health standards with all of the warnings that go out, the water advisories and boil water advisories and so on. West Bank irrigation trustees, to their credit, took that on and built a plant without any grants, they build it all on the backs of the taxpayers. I'm in that area and we paid dearly for an awful long time to accumulate the reserves to do that, and still paying pretty high rates. So they were able to do it, but the West Bank system didn't do it, and they had no reserves to speak. We amalgamated the Lakeview system with the 3 smaller systems that came from the regional districts. We're building a $70 million water treatment grant, and a lot of it is courtesy of federal and provincial governments, with $43 million in grants that we would not get if we had not incorporated. Irrigation districts just aren't eligible for those. So that's been the driving issue. We're a fairly large population, and interior health standards, they're coming at you. They're coming at everybody. They're working their way down from the larger to the smaller systems. So something you're going to have to look at is how you finance that, and you're not eligible for those infrastructure grants. And even if you were, you'd be behind the door in terms of competition.
Thank you so much, Doug. Let's move on now. We've got a couple of questions lined up. We've got Ron, our electoral area director, and then we've got somebody else behind him. But Ron, thank you for your patience. Can we have your question?
Yes, and thank you so much. I first want to say thank you to this panel for the excellent information. Keep eyes wide open regarding roads. Well heard, well said. With respect to be careful on drainage, I couldn't agree more. We have issues I'm quite familiar with, and you are correct. With respect to Mr. Wickman's remarks, I'm well familiar with his position, and I will be providing a written response to the committee and to the local newspaper. Not everything he said was accurate, and Bob, I know when you said that's all true, you may not be familiar with some of the particulars as well as I am, and I do understand the substance of your remarks. One of the things that was different is my understanding. My information could be wrong, and I'm subject to correction by this panel, and indeed by the consultant and others. My understanding is if the irrigation district in question, Skaha Estates, had a conversion to local authority, whether we're incorporated or not, those funds would stay specific to that ratepayer group and would not be commingled and used elsewhere. And that's a detail that I think is real important. So that's not my question, but it is a question. With respect to my question, I did bring about 7 questions, and I want to make it clear I won't ask them all. Indeed, I'll ask one now, and I will hopefully ask no more, because if we're real lucky, they'll get asked by others, and that's my hope. But this is the number one question I hear over and over and over for many years. I went to UDCM, had a meeting with senior ministry, met with the minister in 2019, and I've been talking to people for many years on this process. The number one question I hear is over and over is concern. The question is, what will it cost? Meaning a fear that taxes will go up. Alan's been at public hearings where people have said loudly, guaranteed they'll go up. I've heard people say they'll go up, for example, from $800 to $2,800 a year to $2,800. As an not accurate, not true, but that's the kind of thing people say. So my question for each of you, please tell us the truth. What really happened in your communities? Did the taxes go up, and how much? And how does that compare, in your opinion, to what might have happened had you not incorporated? And give us a 5 or 10 year example. Don't just limit it to one best year, for example. Give us the best answer you can. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Ron. And that captures nicely a question that we've got put forward as well by Kay Midland, one of our panelists. So we'll deal with that one too. It is exactly the one that Ron just asked. Let's start with Bob, and then we'll go from there and ask each of the panelists.
Okay, thanks. I'll start it off. That's the best question out there for sure. What are the taxes going to look like? And here's my sort of thought from the perspective of barrier. But first, let me say this: zero-sum game. So basically, the tax pie is one size in your region, and any area that incorporates takes a slice of the pie. the pie doesn't change. You get your slice of the pie. So that it's a zero-sum game in taxation. How you use your tax revenue is the most important thing. So that being said, in Barrier, the taxes, the actual mill rate, that does fluctuate based on the economy, but basically the taxes paid out per household in Barrier are consistent with the regional district and always have been from day one. What's changed over the past 10 years is fees and charges. And in the study, that was missed or miscalculated. So put a little yellow highlighter under fees and charges and make sure that who's ever doing your study really emphasizes the volatility of fees and charges, because fees and charges are a creature of the economy, of your current services, of your future services, and of the desires of the municipality. And a lot of residents don't understand that fluctuation of fees and charges. And that really is what changed the most in Barrier, and what shocked people was that they weren't aware they were paying this high level for water or for sewer or for whatnot. Okay, that's my comment.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Mayor Blackwell, how about in Clearwater? What have you found in terms of taxes and perhaps picking up on Bob's points, fees, charges, like the whole financial impact on local taxpayers?
Yeah, I mean, as Bob said, it's pretty much your level of taxation for the same assessed value of property inside Clearwater is pretty much identical to outside of Clearwater. This year, assessments, we're going to be asking for 2.5% more budget. That said, if your house was assessed at $400,000 last year, the taxes you're going to be paying this year at this particular point in history are going to be exactly the same taxes you paid in dollars last year. That's where we're to the point where stability is starting to occur. We are, for at least this year, and we haven't gone up much or up or down much over the last few years, a couple percent depending on if we need to bring new services online. This year we're dead flat. So this idea that you're going to start seeing forever seeing 3, 5, 7% tax increases is not accurate. The other thing that you have to decide as a community, if you want to move forward with this, what level of services, what things are you looking for in your community? I mean, the things that I fight for on an average week, the things that are accessible to you, the things that are under our local control, whether it be winter snow plowing, really good drinking water, high schools, in the sense of advocating for them, doctors in the sense of advocating for and fighting for them, things like that. I think I probably, or council, is able to fight to keep things here or improve things here in a way that a regional district just can't. And I think a lot of that is the real value. But if you're afraid of taxes on this, that hasn't been the case. For a house that looks exactly the same on one side of the town boundary as on the inside, they're taxed pretty much an identical rate. That house on our side will likely be on town water. It will have its own dedicated fire department. It will have its own dedicated road maintenance contractor. It will have its own dedicated public works departments, and many services that the province still handles outside in regional districts that we handle locally and can get to locally much faster inside a municipality, if that makes any sense.
Thank you so much. That's excellent. I'm going to come to West Kelowna in a second here. Before I do, though, Paul, in Area C in the Shuswap, Sorrento Blind Bay, I appreciate that the area is still unincorporated, so it's difficult or impossible to kind of speak to any increase or lack thereof that has occurred because, of course, incorporation hasn't happened. But that said, the area that Sorrento Blind Bay is now over 5,000 population, so there's an added police cost that would be incurred. There's the roads and so forth. What tax increase and the potential for a tax increase has been an issue of some discussion in Sorrento Blind Bay. Have you got some perspectives to or some thoughts to provide on this point?
Sure, Alan. Well, we have a no side that's been formed and we have a yes side that's been formed. And the folks on the no side are proclaiming horror stories about how horrendous tax increases are going to occur. And there'll be out of control spending and you'll never have a chance to retrieve that. And the people on the yes side are saying we should examine what we want to have as a community. If we can get more grant funding, if we want more services, if we want more facilities like a rec center, like a medical center, like an ambulance station, like a police station, all those kinds of things, we should consider this. So it it sort of boils down to that sort of argument, unfortunately. I can't give you an impact of incorporation on taxes because we haven't incorporated yet. So all the numbers are projections. So the big argument that's sort of on the no side's plate right now is, well, you know, we're going to elect a council and then they'll just go do what they want to do. And I would counter that by saying, well, you do get to elect them and you do get to pick who's your council is. And wouldn't it make sense to pick people who correspond to your point of view? So as a community, if you decided democratically that you wanted to elect a council that was going to reduce taxes, I guess that could occur. And again, it's a majority that speaks in this country. So that's the way I look at it.
Thank you so much. Doug, how about just around this question off then on the tax increases or lack thereof, or the impacts that have occurred since incorporation? Can you give us the West Kelowna perspective?
Unmute. We started off with an 8% tax increase in 2008. That wasn't that uncommon back in those days. And Alan, you'll probably remember it because you were the author of that figure. In the study, we were proposing a series of, I think, 8% tax increases right off the bat. We had no idea what our capacity was as a city. It was very, very limited. So we went with what the study said, 8%. The next year, we dropped it to 3%, and we were 3% for the next 10 years, 3%, which is actually very reasonable because you're just paying for inflation at that point and getting some things done and putting some money aside, which we had to do for capital projects and for build some reserves, because the regional district did a terrible job of building reserves, and what they had they didn't want to give to us, they wanted to keep. So that's another thing to look for, is the regional district not handing things over. So I was no longer mayor in 2019, different council. I was on council, and I would say a younger group that has a huge appetite for infrastructure, particularly roads and sidewalks and bike paths and all of those kinds of things. So they went to 5%, which included a 1% infrastructure tax. And then last year and this year it's at 4%, which includes that 1% bonus infrastructure tax that simply goes to those kinds of projects. So overall, depending on how much you want to do, we could have stayed at 3%, which is kind of maintenance. The issue, we've had a lot of grants, and that's important because cities can attract grants, whereas regional districts have a harder time and irrigations can't do it at all. So we've got a lot done with grants. We've got a lot done with DCCs, which regional districts struggle to put in place and collect. And that's the developer contribution, and we're a rapidly growing area. So everything we do in terms of infrastructure is a partnership with the development community, the taxpayer, and other levels of government providing us with grants. Utilities are another matter. They're not taxes. Our view on utilities has been the cost is the cost. It's basically run like a private sector company that puts a little bit of money into reserves. And so if the cost of delivering water, clean water or sewer or whatever the case it might be is so much, then we'll charge that. So it's gone up like everything else. I will concede, and we do have to build reserves to attract those grants as well in those areas. So It does go up, but I would say that the trade-off for those that want it, we have a better quality of life in terms of infrastructure. We have the services that we want, and we've got a young and growing population. We're getting a new high school. We need a new elementary and a middle school. We're growing like crazy. So people want the services, and this is maybe where we're a bit different. We have people moving in here from across the country, from larger centers, who say, why don't we have this or that? And that puts pressure on. I must say we have some counselors, and I'm a little critical this way, who want dessert items. They want huge Olympic-sized swimming pools and stuff like that. We're nowhere near ready for that, and they're going to keep pushing for that. And that's maybe one of the things that you need to be concerned about is people that want dessert items that are fancy and so on, but they're not essentials. And we're focused on basically having safe neighborhoods for policing and for traffic and walking, clean water, taking the sewage away, those kinds of things, as opposed to a lot of dessert items. We do have 2 arenas and a swimming pool that are functional right now, and I'm one who thinks we have to make do for now.
Thank you so much. Mayor Blackwell, you got your hand up. I'm going to ask you to provide your comment. I also want, and we've got a question from Murray we're going to go to in a moment, but I also want, Mayor Blackwell, if you could, one issue that has arisen in the discussions in Okanagan Falls and Area D is that of policing, safety, community safety, those kinds of points. Can you, I'd like to know, you are the mayor of a municipality with fewer than 5,000 people, so you don't have responsibility for policing. What is your level of influence on policing matters in your community? Maybe you can address that in addition to the reason you put your hand up.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll actually take that one first because that one's very fresh. What's today? Today's Saturday. Thursday, I had somebody from headquarters of the RCMP sitting in my office asking me exactly what I would like to have influence on local policing with. The local commander is literally across the fence from my office. If I want to talk about policing issues, I pick up my cell phone and I call and I say, Grant, I need to come talk to you about this, or can you pop in and I'll make coffee? It's that simple. The relationship with policing when you get to this point is you make a phone call as a local representative and you have the conversation that we would like more focus put on traffic or on small crime or on maybe CVSC looking at a few junky vehicles coming down the highway if that seems to be the problem. Right now we're going through the Trans Mountain project. So there's a lot of commercial access or vehicles happening around here. So it's definitely a concern. And I think this ties into what I was going to say on for comments. Your ability to have advocacy, to be able to reach out as a mayor or as council, having a point that they want to make and going to any sort of authority, whether it be BC Hydro or TELUS or any minister or ministry or interior health for that matter. I've had all those conversations with all of those people since Christmas. It is not something that is that easy to do as a regional district, and you can really get things done. And I think that is a huge point. Another one that the dessert items that Doug was bringing up. We have a community trails committee that has brought in, I think, over $4 million in grants independent of council, through council, of volunteers that have, I think we're at 9 or 11 kilometers of high quality walking, biking trails and stuff built in town. They've got the plan, they've got all this stuff going on. You can set those things up within local government as subcommittees of council or working groups. We have a forestry working group. We have an economic development task force. We have a senior society that is an offshoot of council, which is funded through various grants. $27 million worth of grants, I think, is the last head count I've got. in money that wouldn't have come to this community in any other way than applying for grants and advocacy that wouldn't come to a regional district. And I think that alone on a community of 2,400 people over a 10 or 13 year period, that's one of the reasons that you really need to seriously think about incorporation.
Thank you very much. Matt, we've got Murray, who's got a question, Murray Gower, and then after Murray, we've got Phyllis Radchenko. So I wonder if you can help us bring those folks forward.
Hi. I'd like to thank the guests for sharing their time, their experiences with us going through incorporation. Each of you have mentioned you've gone to referendum 2 or 3 or 4 times at least. Over that period of time, what changed in your communities that moved them from being against incorporating to being in favor of it? And what suggestions would you have for citizens or this panel if we want to move our community in that direction?
Thank you so much. Let's start with Paul in Area C in the Shuswap. Paul, I know that that your predecessor had gone through this question before, and I know it's come up for a number of years. We can go back in the records and see lots of interest or kind of toes in the pond, as it were, to try things out. What has, in response to Murray's question, what has changed to kind of bring it to the point it's at now?
I think just having the conversation starts getting people interested in, well, what does it mean? For a lot of people, the initial response to incorporation is a flat out no. I do not want my taxes to increase, period. Thank you. End of conversation. And then they walk away from it and don't do any research or look into it. And I think over time, as people start listening to what's going on in the community and thinking about what's going on in other communities and starting to ask secondary questions and questions again for the 3rd time and getting answers that sort of point to some of the benefits, they start opening up their minds to the concept of maybe this isn't such a bad thing, and maybe this is why there are 162 municipalities in BC that most of the population at some point has elected to choose this form of governance. And a lot of that has to do with things like amenities and services, public safety, water, sewer, parks, quality of life, basic things. Thank
you so much. That's excellent. Bob, let's go to you. Barrier's had a number of kicks at the can, as it were. What has changed in answer to Murray's question there?
Yeah, and yeah, Murray, great question, and maybe consistent with one of the other questions is a time frame of say a decade, because that's real change. Is the economy, actually the Canadian economy, Barrier moving from natural resource based economy into the the more digital economy. Families are more reliant on local services, community services, social services. So that level of service was more in demand, and incorporated, we can provide that a little better than a regional district. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Merlin, Mayor, what's your sense?
Yeah, I think things are really good during a few of the first studies. I mean, I think the high for tourism when I was looking after Wells Gray Park was 1997, one of the best banner years in the history of tourism in BC. We had 2 mills running. Everybody was working. There was money flowing around. Things got difficult after that. Things got more complicated. Things that, if you talk about local government, over time, Walkerton, Ontario water crisis has completely changed how water systems operate and work, and will continue to change it until and make them more expensive for years and years to come. What changed people's mind, I think, was a lot of services slipping away, and then also a sense of what do you want? Do you want to live in a town that has fitness programs? Do you want to live in a town with seniors programs? Do you want these things? And I think as the community matured, and people got a little bit older, and it made it, and a lot of people with kids started to go, well, you know, our kids want more than the last generation wanted, and we're going to move to Kamloops, or we're going to move to Kelowna, because our kids want that added level. A lot of it was actually the thought, how do we put the brakes on the drain out of town? And that really started to happen in the early 2000s. You know, we have our own destination marketing association for tourism here that has taken tourism from 12 million or 14 million dollars in 2008 to 36 million dollars the year before COVID came in. I mean, there's just so many things you can do when you have all of these parts of government in place that can ask for or acquire taxation, or, you know, get grant funding, that just didn't occur, that were just left to the chance of the wind, basically, when you were part or solely had the regional district responsible for what happened to you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Merlin. Doug, how about you now? You'll have a good perspective on this because, as you noted, you were one of those who were quite happy being unincorporated for some time and took a little bit of time to convince otherwise.
Yeah.
So what changed for you?
I think that prior to incorporation, we were governed by three, in terms of services, three major entities, two irrigation districts, the province, which delivers a lot of services, and the regional district, and we're on the doorsteps of Kelowna. That's a defining factor as a suburb of Kelowna. And within our boundaries are two very dynamic and growing First Nations reserves. So we had a lot on our plate just in terms of growth. We weren't keeping up. So that's what changed, is we realized that to deliver those services, we needed to be able to do it ourselves and provide them. We also had to get a handle on planning, because the regional district wasn't doing a very good job of it, and we had stuff growing up the hillsides that we didn't really want. They couldn't access the grants that we needed. So when we incorporated, the first project we did was work with, we did inherit a plan from them. We worked with our MP at that time, who was Stockwell Day, and others, and we were able to access pretty close to $15 million in grants, and we built a very large sewer connection infrastructure. We had the plant. The regional district had been able to do that, but most of the community, or a good part of the community, was still on septic. So we've got those 1,500 or so connections in place there that help with water quality in the lake and in the creeks and on the ground in the area. So that's one of the first things we did. And as I say, we've got the second water treatment plant in the community underway. We're building arterial roads like crazy with sidewalks on them, and bike lanes, active transportation. West Kelowna is kind of a community of traffic circles now. That doesn't go well with some people, but with many other people, they're thrilled about it. But I think we've probably got 10 traffic circles on major roads. But it all helps move traffic, and that's as always, that's one of the biggest concerns. We've virtually doubled our policing in the area, which is something we had to do as a growing area. We do not have a very sad downtown like Kelowna does or Kamloops does, and a big bar scene, but we've still got issues where we have to staff up on policing. Well, I did want to say something about policing. In addition, half of our detachments, which is around 50 officers and so on, is rural area. We are a joint detachment with the rural area, and the rural area kind of poaches off the municipal force, and we're always pushing back on that. With the rural detachment looks after West Bank First Nation, which is a population of 10,000 people, mostly not band members, and Big White in the winter, and all the other rural areas, and their resources have not kept up. So we're always in a little bit of a struggle with the province on that, with the rural detachment. But on the other hand, the rural detachment pays rent and makes our police station possible. So it has its pluses and minuses. But we've basically been able to keep up with the demand or start to address the demand for urban services other than dessert items.
Thank you so much. Okay, Phyllis, we've got a question from Phyllis. Phyllis, is Phyllis there, Matt?
Yeah, she's there. Maybe just move closer to the.
Is it on mute?
Nope.
Oh, there we go. I can hear you nice and clearly now, Phyllis. Thank you.
Okay. So I wanted to say that, it's great that we realize that we're in the early steps as we're going through this process, as we decide whether or not we're going to go to incorporation. But it's there's two things, I guess, that I hope that you can address for me. One is help us to understand how the finances don't all of a sudden, it's not like the tap's turned off and now we're left to completely dry with no funds. I understand it's a process over years. And then the other thing is like, how do we find out about these grants? Like what kind of time and expertise does it take to access this grant money? And what's the lag time from when we apply for the grants till we get the grants, so that all of this can happen smoothly? And I know you can't speak real specific, but I guess I'm looking for some kind of reassurance.
Bob, let's start with you. Give us a sense of Barrier's experience in response to Phyllis's question.
Yeah, awesome. Just awesome, Phyllis. Finances, first of all, let me just say that in the process of the letters patent issuance from the province, and then incorporation and the transfer of funds and the negotiation and therein of, the province has done this many, many times, and they will take you through the process, and they will never, ever steer incorporations wrong. The finances take care of itself. There's a 5-year hiatus. And I can't emphasize more the fact that this is where the province shines when it comes to incorporation, and they have to take care of it, obviously, because statutorily wise, it's in their best interest. On the grant side of things, like I'm an administrator, and personally, I find that council members and elected officials are way more over enthusiastic about grants than an administrator. And the reason is because there is a litany of grant opportunities and applications out there, and it's a competitive process. The grant applications are a competitive process, and there's only so much money in the bucket. And so your likelihood of receiving grants is on a percentage basis, and the timing could be 6 months, it could be a year, could be a second window of application. It could be years to receive grant funding. So the rule of thumb from an administrator point of view is you don't budget on receiving a grant. You budget that you're not going to receive the grant. And if you receive the grant, it's a windfall. And that's a rule of thumb from an administrative point of view. But don't be dismayed. In newer incorporated municipalities do have a leg up for grant access. There's lots of capacity building grants. There's green grants. There's study grants. There's lots of grants out there to apply for. The facility and infrastructure grants are a little harder to come by, but with good studying, good asset management, and good preparation, they'll come. The grants will come. Barrie has been very successful with allocation of grant funding. So has Clearwater, maybe not as well as Barrier, but they're doing okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Let me go to Merlin. Then I'm going to ask a slightly different question to some of the other members. But Merlin, give us, as one of those who, as Bob says, is more enthusiastic than administration about grants. Give us your thoughts.
Yeah, grants are a thing that you go after. We're currently going after, I think it's a $1.8 million sewer grant to fix what's called a sewer siphon, which controls the flow of sewer down to our grant-funded new sewer treatment plant. which is tied into our grant-funded well system, tied into our grant-funded trails program. That all those other things that I talked about as far as seniors programs and healthy living programs, which all at some level are partially grant funded. One of the things that you hire great administrators, like people like Bob, who are just love writing grants, and are more than willing to take two or three runs at it, knowing full well that sometimes you're not successful the first time, but maybe you will be on the second or third time. These grants come up on a fairly regular basis, and they have been in the last 7 or 8 years very frequent. There's been times before that, and I fully expected if we go into a recession that grant funding will dry up. But you're basically getting tax money from other levels of government or other places that you wouldn't normally get out of your local tax base. Yes, it's all the people's dollars being funded back into these things, but it may not be your people. It could be other people, or it could be industry royalties, which is another one. Oil and gas, forestry royalties, other sources of income. Clearwater right now is taking in nearly $1 million on a $2.7 million annual budget in income related to the Trans Mountain project that is not taxation dollars. I mean, these are the sort of things as local government you can occasionally get really good windfalls on, and then use that money to fund the things that you want to do.
Thank you. Okay, now listen, it's 2:50. We've scheduled ourselves to 3, so we don't have a lot of time left. I'm going to give our director Ron Aubry a chance to ask another question in a second. Before we come to Ron, I want to ask, because one of the, as Matt noted at the very outset of this discussion panel, one of the tasks before the committee, and indeed before the community right now, is and I just know we have one more individual standing to ask a question. We'll come to him as well. One of the questions, though, before the committee is that of setting a boundary, of recommending a boundary should there be a decision to go forward into an incorporation study. We've heard a lot about the pros of incorporation, the reasons why different communities may wish to incorporate, but I wonder, are there areas that should remain outside of an incorporation study area? Are there areas that are better governed, in your view, under the electoral area regional district governance system? And I wonder, Paul, I know that again, I know we haven't gone to incorporation yet in Area C in the Shuswap, but give me a sense from your perspective on what areas may not be well suited and why, kind of, for an incorporation study area.
Sure, Alan. Well, I think the ones that come to mind immediately are agricultural lands. Those zoned agricultural or in the OCP as agricultural, they in fact can be hurt by incorporation. And so I think you want to try to avoid agricultural land as much as you can. I think, when we talked about the boundary analysis in our area, my direction to you was let's get the most number of people, the greatest amount of taxation with the fewest kilometer of roads, and optimize that, because that's the best approach. You want to have a sustainable tax base, and you want to minimize the amount of roads that you have. And so that helps direct a lot of where your decision making falls into place. The other aspect is we had a couple of communities who did not feel attached to the incorporated study area. The Hilltop community and the White Lake community didn't feel attached, and were in the original incorporation study area, and they came to us with a suggestion that it might be best to exclude them, and that decision was made and approved by the ministry. So if there's not a fit culturally or socially, perhaps it's best to make that decision early as well.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Paul. Doug, what's your sense? Areas that may be better left outside of an incorporation area, that better served by electoral area regional district model?
Well, I think we did that. First, we have lots of agricultural land within West Kelowna, and we value it, we protect it. we turn it to our advantage. We have the West Side Wine Route with now 15 wineries, mostly through agricultural land, but not completely. But it's a big community asset as far as we're concerned. And we also do have fruit growing areas. Yeah, I mentioned earlier on in phase 1 of our study, we dropped some areas that really didn't seem to fit. Bear Creek North up to Fintry area didn't want in, and we didn't want them. Wasn't contiguous, and we just thought it was would be a bit of a stretch providing services up West Side Road towards Vernon. And similarly, there were some other areas that their fate, their future probably lies more with the district of Peachland. They are contiguous to Peachland on all sides, Trepanier and Brent Road and those areas. So we chose not to take those areas into our study. So we chose an area that I guess it just made sense to us that we could service. The biggest issue that dominated the discussion was, should we join Kelowna or an amalgamate as a part of Kelowna? And we had a deal where we would have 3 years of phasing in, including electoral representation, or do we go on our own? And the electorate decided.
Okay, great, thank you. Bob, you had your hand up? Oh, we got you on mute there. Good.
A little bit of experience here on the boundary front is, you know, like personally as administrator, in the feasibility study of your review, have a good look at it, but get what you can if it's viable, because we just finished a boundary extension. So we just included 200 acres of development land that will now become residential. It took 4 years to get that boundary extension approved by the province, and any boundary extension requires First Nation consent, not consultation, consent. So get what you can, when you can, if it's viable.
Thank you so much. Matt, we've got, and Merlin, I'm going to come on to you on the next question, but Matt, we've got Ethan standing with a question.
Good, Ethan. Hi, thank you very much. So 2 panelists advised no tax increase. One advised 8% increase in the first year, then they advised rate of inflation after that. You've all agreed that post-incorporation, the grant money you received is massive. So I'm a numbers guy, I'm a mortgage broker, so I have a very simple question. Can you please tell us the total grant money your community has received, divide that by the total number of tax-paying households, so I can hear the per capita grant money that you've received per house? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Merlin, do you have a calculator there in front of you? You can give us an estimate of
I can give you the estimates of those.
By people?
Yeah, I can give you the estimates of the grants and the household number. So 1147 households.
Sure.
So I'm sure he's frantically writing down with his pencil there. And I think since 2000 and realistically 2008. So what are we at, 14 years now? Pushing on 14 years, 13 and a half years. The last count I have is 27 million. And grant dollars that have come to this community directly. There's also stuff that we have a community forest here, which is part of what we do here, that throws money through grants and other means into the community. It's not just grants that generate income for the community as well. So, but yeah, it definitely is one of those huge advantages over not being incorporated.
Thank you. Bob, any sense from Barrier's perspective?
Recently,
you're good.
Somebody does that magically. Okay, so recently, as an example, again, factual, per capita, we just got a knock on our door from the province that they have some end year funding for grants that weren't all expended, and they took one of our projects off the shelf that we had submitted 2 years ago, and now it has legs again. And it looks like that we'll receive $1 million grant, like a windfall, because one, we had submitted a project, it was viable, it was economically sustainable, and it was supported by council. And so that had legs, and we'll get that $1 million. So that means you know, $1 million for our municipality, you know, it's like $1,000 per person almost right there, just by being incorporated and having project ready, shelf ready projects. And it'll go towards the expansion of our industrial park, a brand new industrial park. We basically subdivided 13 industrial lots. We've sold all the lots. The sale of the land went into reserves, and now we're building out the rest of the water system. Very viable. Ultimately means revenue into our municipal bank, so that we can provide better services to the community. So, just an example of the value and the the optimism of grants is out there, and it works.
Thank you very much. Matt, did you have a comment to make on something?
Just got a comment coming in from somebody online. Just wanting to remind, let me do that in my closing comments, okay? So whenever,
okay.
Question from Ron, did you, or what?
Yeah, I think we've got time for Ron. I know you've got a few lined up there. Would you like to ask another question, and then we'll start to wrap up?
Thank you very much, Alan, and thank you, Matt. This is an easy question for the panel. If and when a municipality comes to this area, regardless of boundary, would you all, or any of you, but I'm assuming all, be available for advice and counsel from time to time for the new council?
That's right. No.
Go ahead, Merlin. Why don't you go first?
It gets better than that. You know, our former CAO is a lady named Leslie Grew. She is currently working with Lytton to help Lytton recover. We are lending Lytton our bylaws right now so that Lytton can start again. We have met with McBride Council. I have met with councils and regional district people from all over the region, with Kamloops City Council on the housing studies that we've done in Clearwater, the road bylaws we've done in Clearwater, the things that we have done in Clearwater, and we have either inspired, encouraged, or passed on that information as a local government to other people. And we will continue to do that. When you, because it will be a when, and it may not be this time, and it may not be the next 2 times you do this study, I will come to your first meeting and watch and clap.
Doug, how about yourself? Are you give us your sense of kind of the sharing of advice and information between and among municipalities?
Well, I think that there's a really good system that works that way amongst administrators of all kinds, CFOs. We do have associations like SILGA and UBCM and FCM where we do see each other and we do share just on an ad hoc, offhand kind of basis. Yes, of course. And Ron and I have already talked. A few months ago, I did a file dump for him and sent him a lot of stuff about our previous incorporation efforts. So I think you'll find people very eager and willing to help you out if you incorporate. The key to it, I think, is to take your time in hiring a really good CAO and CFO. They'll get really good people who've maybe they've been through some of this before. And we were fortunate to hire our first team of administrators who really put a good footing under us. We thought we'd be many more years getting on our feet than we were because we hired excellent people, and our council took the time to do that.
Good point. Good point. Now, listen, we're going to come, I'm going to pass over to Matt in a moment here just for some closing comments, but I do want to just pitch one more quick question to all panelists, and we'll go through one at a time. And I'll get you just to answer quickly and kind of in a point form if you could. The question really is, give us from your perspective one reason why you would want, why an area should consider incorporation and going down that path, and one reason, maybe one reason why you may not want to, or you may want to be cautious going down that. So kind of one pro and one con. Paul, let's start with you.
I'd say the pro is local decision-making and self-determination. You get to decide what you want to have in your community with your money. The con is you're going to pay a bit more for that privilege.
Thank you so much. Well said and nice and succinct. Excellent. Bob, give us a sense from your perspective.
Okay, the pro is civic pride, community spirit, for sure. And maybe one of the cons would be the infrastructure costs.
Okay, thank you. Merlin.
Oh, mute button is just horrendous. Anyways, yeah, what the other two have said before us. I mean, it's determining your own destiny. The con is really, really do the homework up front on what your infrastructure costs are, what you have out there, decide what you want in and out of those boundaries, and be strong on that. And to Bob's comment, or maybe it was somebody else's there, hire really good people up front. Do your research as to who you want to work for you. I think that is probably one of the biggest ways you're going to be successful if this passes.
Thank you. And Doug, give us a pro and a con. Give us a reason for and a reason against.
Well, in short, the reason for is to get things done. And in our case, we've had overwhelming infrastructure needs because of, as I always say, we inherited rural infrastructure in a rapidly growing urban area. So we've really had to put our nose to the grindstone, and grants of help, and the way municipalities can run their finances versus a regional district. Regional districts have fund accounting, which means they can't move money around from one allocation to another very easily, but whereas municipalities can, they can use one to offset another. So much smoother in terms of taxation and attracting grants and getting really big infrastructure like our $70 million water treatment plant done. The con is kind of the flip side of that, and that's that. And I worry about it with it. You might elect a council that wants a bunch of dessert items, and we've already got people in our community who want a bigger or a second swimming pool, and they want a third arena, and they want all this stuff, and we just have to bear with it and get the basics done, because we're not done. But these are sexy things for the electorate, and people vote for them. So that's the danger, is you attract people like that to run for your council.
Thank you so much. Listen, I'm going to pass it over to our chair, Matt, to give closing comments. I will just say, from my perspective as moderator, thank you, gentlemen, so much for taking the time today. It's a lot to ask for you to come out on a beautiful day like this and giving time away from your families and your activities, but certainly very grateful for all of your wisdom and all of your comments. So thank you all. Matt, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Ellen and Sherry, for setting this up, and thank you to Doug Finlater, both Paul Beminov and Norman Blackwell. Your comments and insights were extremely helpful. Thank you. And Merlin, I've got your number. So before we go here, I just want to remind all the participants, both online and in person, thank you very much for showing up. Our primary purpose is to inform. Which way you vote, I'm happy to vote. Okay, I just want you to have the best information, and asking these questions at forums like this, looking at the reports that are already online, and there'll be more coming out. That's, in my view, that's how you're going to inform yourself on fact as opposed to rhetoric, and that's the benefit of this process. We're 30 years since the last exercise like this, so a lot of rhetoric built up there. The exercise now is to benefit facts. So this does mark the end of our sort of big public meetings. Okay, it better be short.
Yes, it is. Okay. I'd like to thank all the fellows that showed up and gave us all positive aspects. of this scenario. But there was no one here invited here for the negative aspects. Does that mean there's no negative aspects, or does that mean you know, online, I see one or two people on there saying we don't want it, and others say they want it, but I don't see anyone that you've invited here to tell us what the negative aspects they feel is for incorporation. Is there, you know, you got the four positives.
Got the question. Yeah. And so I'm going to take a real quick one at this, and then I'm going to go to Alan or Sherry, and then I'm going to get on with the close, just out of respect for everybody, because we said we'd go till tonight. Okay, so quickly, as I see it, you know, we've got a group of people that wanted to look at incorporation. Okay, and there are, so we're looking at the reasons for and against as we go, and we're collecting those and amassing them. I think we were asked, you know, we asked the speakers why you wouldn't come, you know, a closing comment that they made. So I'll defer to Alan for any further comment.
Can I just say one thing?
Thank you.
All right. Okay. And look, this is the last stand up.
Very quick.
Okay? Yeah.
Has there ever been an incorporated community go backwards? Unincorporated.
Actually, we've got, again, I'll go to Alan on this. There is one, and there's a very good reason for it. If you want to speak to Jumbo Creek or okay. Alan, over to you.
Sure. Thanks very much, Matt. We were very happy to have these four gentlemen come and spend some time with us because we wanted to bring to the community people who had gone through either one or in some cases several different attempts or studies to consider incorporation. We know that if we look at Councillor Findlater, for example, we had people who had entered the process with one position, left the process with a different perspective. We knew that all of the gentlemen here have been part of studies who have looked in detail at various analyses, who had considered pros and cons. And we wanted to get advice in terms of what types of communities to put into boundaries, what types to consider not putting into boundaries. So, and we've certainly tried in our questions to kind of look not only at all the potentially good reasons, depending on one's perspective, to consider incorporation, but also some of the lessons learned and pitfalls to avoid, and reasons why you may not want to be incorporated. And as we've stated throughout all of our public meetings, we are dealing with two equally legitimate but very different forms of local government: electoral area, regional district, and municipalities. Some areas are very well served through as electoral areas and regional districts. Other areas are not. So we tried to pick folks from municipalities and from areas that have experienced some of the same pressures and developments as Okanagan Falls and Area D. So if there's a sense out there we didn't bring enough of a different perspective, then that's on me as the moderator of this. But we certainly tried to. Merlin, I think you had your hand up, and Doug, you had your hand up.
Yeah, for sure. You know, there are downsides, but you know, it's, a lot of that's actually been brought up, which are things like, you know, be very careful at the beginning. You know, what areas you take into the district, your district or your municipality when you do that. There's also, it's on you. It's on you as a council and as a local organization to solve your own problems. Jumbo, as you mentioned, Jumbo Glacier is the only municipality that has disappeared and has become unincorporated. But there are a lot of communities out there that a couple in Alberta just recently did that, where they merged services, where they basically said, you know, why don't we have the same public works department for you know, two different communities that are close enough together. Those are the kinds of decisions, ironically, that you can make or you can start contemplating as local government that maybe you can't as something else. You're still going to be governed one way or another. You're still going to have local representation. It's more the decision is, do you want more local control? Do you want more of the ability to influence what your community, because I've always gone through OK Falls. My uncle's a painter down that way, and always thought it was a municipality. I didn't understand that it wasn't. And it, when this conversation came up, I'm like, oh, right. I've never seen anybody from OK Falls at UBCM as a councillor or the mayor. It already makes sense to me that you should be. Just seeing the assets, the community, everything that you have there, and I could just see it getting better from that. The 1 out of 10 things that are worse are definitely outweighed by the 9 that are better.
Thank you very much. Doug, did you have your hand up as well?
Just a little bit of history. I'm aware of 2 instances where there were attempts to disincorporate. One was Lake Country, where the first council was elected. The mayor was Bob McCoubry. That went fine. But the second mayor was ran on a platform of disincorporation, Rolly Hine, and he went on to be a really good mayor, as it turned out. The second one was West Kelowna, where our first council was a split council. We had a slate run against us, and the mayor, Rosalind, and another councillor were elected on a platform of disincorporation. It was a very interesting year, and the rest of the council had to manage that. And the second election, I decided to take her out, run against her, and lo and behold, she ran for councillor. So we continued to deal with her for another 4 years after that. But the electorate takes care of that, and that's about all I can say. Is that over time, I think if people begin to see the value in it, even if they're against it at first, they begin to see when you're getting something done, that this is useful to have local people in charge as opposed to somebody across the lake in an office on KLO Road.
Thank you, Matt. Let's we're 15 minutes overtime here, so we've kept our guests a little bit longer. So perhaps I can get you just to wrap us up. Oh, we don't hear you there, Matt.
No, you should be able to hear me now.
There we go. We got you now.
4th time now. This marks the end for public meetings. This format. Our committee will continue to meet, and you're welcome to sign in. And there's a Q&A period at the end of every one of those meetings if you have a question for us. It's so, as I say, it's certainly not the end of our public engagement. And one further big component of public engagement is a survey that will be available or coming out soon. So take a look at RDOS Regional Connections, and you'll see that survey shortly. I do want to just make note, we lost a couple of individuals. One individual has been standing up at the start there and wanted to ask a question right from the outset. And, it's hard running with things, okay? We took these panelists time of day from other communities. Really what we decided to do is of no consequence to them, but they gave us part of their afternoon. And so we wanted to hear some comments from them at the start. And so that was the intent, to get a lot of their comments out on the table beforehand. And by the time we got to one individual, I kept gesturing at him, you're next. But he'd already left. So, we've done our best to try to present you with information, give you a chance to ask some questions. If you've got more questions, again, go to RDOS Regional Connections. There's a place in there where you can ask a question. It will come to either the staff or the consultants or the committee, and it will be answered. Okay? And again, then that's kept and it's maintained, and other people get to look at it. And whether it's for or against, it just feeds the data set that we're all trying to work with. Okay, so I want to say thank you very much for coming. And hopefully we work our way through the next process and take a look at this. But our first step will be to table a report this summer that sets out, this is the area that we are looking at incorporating. Okay, so that's our, thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Hey, Alan, you can help me.
Bye-bye.
Okay,